And I am honored to welcome you all this morning to our Gun Violence, Children, and Mental Health panel event and resource fair. A special thank you to all of our panelists. Our moderator will have you all introduce yourselves. And as a very special thank you to our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and our Government Relations Committee who put this very important event together for us. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Willie Simmons, he's a member of our board of directors and will be moderating today's event.
I love the yay in the back here. My kind of woman. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I know it's early in the morning, but you know, let's put some oomph, some life. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right, we're live. How are you all doing? All right. Well, hello. Thank you for joining us for today's first panel on gun violence, children, and mental health. My name, as Colleen said, is Dr. Willie Simmons. You can just say Willie. I am a psychologist and a humanitarian. Today's event is hosted as a joint effort by Child Guidance Resource Center's DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, and our Government Relations Committee. Child Guidance delivers evidence-based behavioral health services and community-wide wellness programs to children and families throughout the 5-county Philadelphia region. With gun violence traumatizing so many children, families, and in many cases, entire communities, Child Guidance Resource Centers felt a need to host this event. Today, we bring you panelists who will share their views on the topic and offer ways we can work together for solutions. Our first panel today includes individuals and local organizations who work in various capacities to improve the well-being of our community. I would like to go down the line of all of our panelists. Please introduce yourself and or the organization that you're representing.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Yours works, you go.
You guys can hear me? Okay, I can hear myself now, that's right. But you guys can hear me. I'm Reverend Christopher High C. Terrell. I'm the pastor of Prospect Hill Baptist Church, and I'm currently serving as the chair of Heeding God's Call to End Gun Violence.
Hi, my name is Kayla Kachi. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a Delaware County community resident serving on the board for UDTJ, Understanding Devotion, Take Action, Justice. And we work in the community to serve all those who need justice.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Malcolm Yates. I am the Director of Government Relations for a company called Public Health Management Corporation, which is PHMC. We are a public health provider that works with the city and the state when it comes down to their health departments, and also as a convener of the Delaware County Black Caucus.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Stacy Clark, and in addition to being a proud psychologist with Child Guidance Resource Center, my full-time work is with the School District of Philadelphia, where I am the Director of Prevention and Intervention. The Office of Prevention and Intervention supports the mental health and behavioral health needs for students in the Philadelphia School District, as well as all the crisis response for critical incidents that occur in the city.
Good morning. My name is Shira Council. I am the Program Director for Chester Community Coalition, and we provide supportive services and treatment services for community members directly impacted by gun violence.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Editus Addy. I'm the pastor of Agape International Outreach Ministries. I'm also a clinical manager at Greater Philadelphia Health Action, providing behavioral health services on a community-based level. Thank you.
Good morning. I don't think this is good morning. I'm Carol Listoka, and I'm the organizing manager at Ceasefire PA. We are the state's gun violence prevention, advocacy, and educational organization, and we work to give
citizens a voice so that they can impact policy at the state level to make it harder for people to get their hands on a gun and save lives.
Hi, I am so excited to be sitting with my old coworker. My name is Colleen Kennedy, and I currently serve as the National Organizing Associate for Supermajority. You can find our information at supermajority.com, but we are fighting for a world where women and femmes are able to live safe lives, and I am really thrilled to be here.
Thank you all for being here. I really love the diversity of the panelists, and I think this is going to make for a fruitful discussion. So for the next question, anyone could answer. So if you need to answer, just put your hands up and they'll pass the mic to you. And it's, how do you think gun violence impacts the behavioral or mental health of children and families?
I don't know if does this work? Oh, it does work. I'm sorry, I just ruined a little bit. Okay, so one thing that I was thinking about in terms of this question is something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Score. A lot of practitioners in this room probably know what it is, but it basically measures the goodness or the amount of trauma in a child's home life. It doesn't, unfortunately, really measure very well what's happening in one's community, but ultimately, when we think about gun violence, I think it's really important for us to think about the impact of trauma and the impact that ends up being long-term health effects. The other thing that I wrote down in my notes is just that there was this Everytown study that talked about all the actual impacts for gun violence survivors. I think we so often talk about the death toll of gun violence, but so many people survive gun violence. And unfortunately, the leading need that people talked about in this survey was 32% of respondents said that they had no access to mental health services. So I'm hoping that this conversation helps to really spur forward resources for those mental health services, because we're not even doing that at this point.
If I can add to that, a 2020 study by CHOP showed a real severe impact on children when there was a shooting in their neighborhood. When there was a shooting in their neighborhood, children were 2 times as likely to visit an emergency room at CHOP for mental health needs. Also, there was a measurable lowering in their test grades. So we're seeing, that Everytown study borne out locally in a CHOP study.
So certainly the idea of gun violence is a national epidemic. Some 48,830 individuals in these United States die from gun violence. 54% constitute suicide, 43% constitute murder, 3% constitute gun, like police officers shooting people, non-related issues such as accidental death and so forth and so on. But how does that affect our children? Number one, if gun violence is within our community, parents are more likely to be concerned whether mass shooting will happen at their homes. Children are not able to perform well in school, concentrate, they have anxiety, there's the presence of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders. All of these challenges constitute whether or not they can perform in school. So it is indeed a national epidemic. Just in Pennsylvania alone, there is a 60% increase of children who have been victimized by gun violence. In Pennsylvania alone, 11,000 emergency-related gun injuries happened. So it is a national epidemic. It is affecting our state, and that's something that needs to be done. And I will certainly recommend that the state representative. Okay, who is Lisa Borowski? Okay, so there is something that needs to be done, as my fellow panelists stated. The state of Pennsylvania has what you call preemption. That is Section 1620, Title 18, law that prohibits local authorities to manage gun regulation within their localities. So there's more advocacy that needs to be done. For example, the faith-based entity have done marches in Drexel Hill to be able to stop the gun violence, where in fact in Pennsylvania, in that location alone, we've lost 174 individuals to gun violence. So much needs to be done. It's affecting our children, and hopefully together we can find solutions. Thank you.
I just wanted to piggyback on what the first panelist mentioned about the ACEs study. And depending on when a traumatic experience happens, it can serve as a stuck point. So for an adult who may have experienced some trauma at the age of 12, it may be difficult for them to support a child who's also experiencing some symptoms of trauma. Because as we know, sometimes symptoms of trauma for children manifest somatically. So your child may be complaining of stomach aches or headaches. And for that adult who is the parent and also stuck at possibly age 12, because that's when they experience their traumatic event, it makes it more challenging for them to support their child.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what everybody else is saying from a traumatic perspective. And speaking from a school district where our role is to educate young folks, children cannot learn when they don't feel safe. So they're in this persistent, hypervigilant state where they cannot re-regulate, and they are not accessing the part of their cognitive brain that's needed for learning, for socializing, for playing, for healing. And so as long as students can't access that part, they're going to have difficulty learning. And so as long as there is persistent community violence, that will continue to be an issue.
You know, it's good to hear the statistics. It's good to hear a lot of the numbers that's being given to us, because I am one of those children who went through gun violence. I am a survivor. I was shot at the age of 6 years old. So when you start to talk about trauma and education deficiencies or not able to pay attention in class, I lived it. I know exactly what our panelists are speaking of. If it wasn't for these types of programs that provide bereavement, trauma, mental health, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So it's necessary that we continue to develop more programs. Unfortunately, we want to prevent gun violence, but unfortunately, I'm 42. It happened when I was 6, and here I am sitting on the panel. So obviously, this is going to be a fabric of our school district, unfortunately. So we need to continuously build around preventative ways, but also ways to get our children more help around mental health and behavioral health when they are affected by gun violence.
Yeah, I definitely would like to piggyback off of what you said. I think it all is stemming from what resources we can provide our children ahead of time before this happens. We should be talking about mental health in all stems of the areas, both before this can happen and after. I think programming is like the biggest key to our student success, and mental health is kind of unlocking the box. So I think if we just focus a lot of our attention, not just, on the numbers, but the programming that can happen to better our students' mental health, I think that would be fixing the problem.
Yeah, I would just echo what my brother said a second ago. My stepbrother was killed when I was a junior in high school, and watching how that affected my family. One of the things that we do in Heeding God's Call that perhaps you've seen, one of our big ministries, is the T-shirt memorial to the lost display that you might see in front of various churches. And like folks have been saying, it's easy to focus on the specific deaths, but they're the people that they leave behind that are, and I've seen it in my own family how it affected my stepfather when my brother died. He certainly required more assistance to be able to parent me, to parent my sister through that. So certainly the mental health services are needed for our families, for those victims that are left behind.
Thank you all so much. Some things that I heard is just, with regards to the ACEs study, I'm so glad it was mentioned, because while it doesn't necessarily talk about the impact in the community, I think the families, the homes, are a microcosm of what's happening in the larger community, so it kind of taps into that a bit. And then the other things with regards to stats and numbers, it's not just numbers, these are lives, these are souls, these are, visions, unrealized goals and so forth and so on. So I really appreciated you all taking, something to share with us with regards to the impact. The next question has to do with how do you think, and anyone again can go, and I would like to remind you, if you're speaking, to please bring the mic a little bit closer so we can all hear you. Most of you did a wonderful job at it. All of you did a wonderful job. But just as a friendly reminder. But how do you think being a member of a marginalized or minority group compounds the issue of gun violence? So the question again is, how do you think being a member of a marginalized or minority group compounds the issue of gun violence?
So one of the things that I've seen and experienced, I'll speak to, is just the need for diversity and representation in all of the systems. And so, young people and children and families who are experiencing this, oftentimes when they're seeking help from doctors, mental health workers, teachers, those folks don't always represent their community or look like them. They not speak the same language. And so that just creates a whole other barrier to have, or either have or feel like you have someone who doesn't necessarily connect to you right away. And so I just want to emphasize the importance of representation at all levels in all systems so that people can see. I understand that, it's really only when you first see someone what they look like, you may make biases. Once you create relationships, everything is fine. But I think if you're part of a marginalized community and you're having to seek help, which is in a vulnerable space, and then you're having to seek help from people who don't look like you, may not speak your language, may not understand, or may not feel like they understand where you're coming from, that just compounds, the vulnerability. And then the other thing I just wanted to speak to really quickly is that, we talk about trauma and gun violence and mental health. All of these students and children and families who are affected don't necessarily have mental health disorders, and they don't necessarily have PTSD. We're just talking about terrible things happening in people's lives. And so as we think about helping and healing, we don't want to get too clinical and think too much about getting a diagnosis and getting medication, right? We just want healing and recovery.
In our community, and communities of marginalized community members, there is a level of desensitization to violence and trauma. So we often don't speak about it as it's as much of an issue as it is. And then if we think about social media, how often we are able to have access to videos and pictures of members of marginalized communities being victimized, there's this perception that Black and brown people don't experience pain as others as well, which also compounds it. But me being able to see myself as some of those victims also triggers anger and frustration, as well as it does for other youth. And then that violence spills out into the community. There's a lot of impact that comes from social media and having access to being exposed to that as well.
When I look at it, I see it as, I come from an underserved neighborhood, going to the underserved school. That's an underemployed community. And it's overly served with violence, drugs, and guns. So you talk about compounding and compounding and compound. It's a point where you you were saying, you get desensitized, right? And unfortunately, some of our students has been that way. Where is it? Just another day. Even to the climate of society. Oh, this just happened in West Philly, North Philly. Oh, that just happened in Upper Darby or Chester. And we just kind of sweep it under the rug. So, we have to figure out, I know it's a multi-pronged approach where we can sit, everyone has a hand in reducing it. To help alleviate some of the compounding of things. So we can continue to invest in our communities, we can invest in our school districts, we can start doing better workforce, therefore things can start to ease out. So, yeah.
I feel as though being like a young person in these communities, I realize I come from Ridley, but I go all over the county and all over the community to different school board meetings, right? Because I saw in high school how even though I saw an issue that was impacting me in a different way, I saw other communities who didn't have the resources that my school was privileged to have. So I went into those communities, sat down with my friends, and just learned and listened about different areas of help that these students needed, because those students were the same age as me, but because of the lack of resources, they weren't able to get through some of the issues I was able to get through. So I think it just really piggyback off of when you're a Ridley student and you're seeing something that happens in Upper Darby or in Chester or Lansdowne, but you know that you're going to have those resources because of where you come from, versus you know your friend is not going to have those same resources because of where they come from. I think we just need to unite in our community and across the county just to hand each other those programs that so many students are desperate to have, that we all deserve to have.
I just want to talk about a couple other areas of marginalization. First off, access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely that a domestic violence survivor will actually die at the hands of their abuser. So, you know, it's bad enough to be in a domestic violence situation, but if there's a gun in the presence of the home, their chance of death is much higher. The other statistic that I looked up was that 3 out of every 4 homicides of trans people happen with a gun. And I think when we talk about marginalization, obviously there are particular stories that make the headlines constantly, but we're talking about not only racism, but anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, violence against disabled people. And when we think about the different scenarios in which people have violence, I think we need to think about the policy solutions that actually can be considered gun violence prevention. We obviously have a problem of not regulating our guns enough in Pennsylvania and all across the country, but housing is gun violence prevention. A living wage is gun violence prevention. Mental health care is gun violence prevention. And when you think about marginalization, I think it's an excuse, frankly, for white middle-class people to just check out of the conversation and say, that problem doesn't affect me, even though we know that it affects all of us. But even if you don't care about the human cost of it, the financial burden across the country of gun violence every year is $557 billion a year. Imagine what we could be spending $557 billion of our economy on if we didn't have to deal with this problem.
I'm just going to say the thing, right? Yes, gun violence disproportionately impacts Black and brown people, people in marginalized communities, the LGBTQ plus community. Black males in Pennsylvania, aged 15 to 34, have a firearm homicide rate that is 39 times higher than white males. Okay, so why is this happening? Well, there's access to guns, right? There's also all sorts of other things that are playing into it. Housing, disinvestment in communities. What we need to do, I believe, is send a wake-up call to Harrisburg, because it is very easy for people sitting in positions of power, when they are white men sitting in positions of power, to ignore other people's problems, people who don't look like them, or feel like them, or think like them, or sound like them. And it's time for all of us to demand change, to speak up, and to realize that we are all Pennsylvanians, and all Pennsylvanians count. Every life counts. What we've seen is politicians, state legislators, place the blame for the gun violence rates and the gun violence happening in Philadelphia on a lack of punishment happening and crimes in Philadelphia, when what they could be doing is preventing access of guns to dangerous people in the first place. It's so easy to buy a gun. I've heard people say it's easier to buy a gun than to get drugs. I don't know if there's any proof behind it, but I've heard for that person it was true, right? And we need to make it harder. I could, if we wanted to, if I could go out into the parking lot and as an individual, I could sell you an AR-15 assault-style rifle out of the trunk of my car without conducting any kind of a background check. You could be any kind of person, right? And I don't legally in the state of Pennsylvania have to run a background check on you. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. That's just one small example. Are we taking questions now?
Not yet.
Well, thanks to all the wonderful panelists. Gun violence in Pennsylvania is a major problem. And so we need to find, like my panelists stated, the political will to impressing upon our lawmakers to repeal that 1974 law. It needs to be repealed. Section 1620, Title 18 with respect to offense and crimes. Judges since 1974 have been using that law to restrict local jurisdictions from regulating guns in parks, recreation centers, not doing background checks, among several other things. Pennsylvania children have been victimized to the tune of 1,500, based on statistics of the Gun Archives, the PA Health Center. This is serious. It's not a black or white thing. We must act and act now. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, it is the fierce urgency of the now. Delaware County is growing in terms of gun violence. It's not just Philadelphia. Folks in Philadelphia are leaving and going to the suburbs. Things are happening all over the place. My esteemed colleague mentioned the national statistics for the billions of dollars. In Pennsylvania, it cost us $8.5 billion. That's $665 US per household you can pay monthly. So we must act as a community, irrespective of our socio-economic or political labels. Thank you.
And on that note of wanting to act, at the Heating God's Call resource table, we have a number of letters that you can sign to your local representatives. I know you have a chance, some of them will be present today during the next panel. But if you want to do something now, you have an opportunity before you leave today to participate.
That's great. Thank you so much. There was a lot that was said there, and I'm trying to be mindful of time, but I'll summarize by just saying some of the things I heard is with regards to marginalized or minority communities and the compounding effect of gun violence. What we're hearing is, underserved, underrepresented, under-resourced, and heavily overlooked. And all of those things impact the way in which we see this compounding effect within marginalized communities. And easy access, not to forget that piece, because that was huge. All right, the next thing is more personal. So what have you or your organization done, or what do you or your organization do to address the issue of gun violence?
So, at Chester Community Coalition, we take a comprehensive tertiary approach to the problem. We have a partnership with Crozier Chester Medical Center, and we have a hospital-linked violence intervention program where our violence intervention specialist, or credible messenger, is housed in the emergency department. So if a shooting or stabbing victim comes into the emergency department, they engage them in the golden hour. So once they're stabilized within the first hour, they're there to just provide supportive services and just be there to support them. This credible messenger also has lived experience, so they've also been shot. So we're intentional about hiring individuals who are from the community as well. So in addition to providing those peer support services, they're also offer case management, and we offer therapy for free for families and individuals who have been impacted by gun violence as well. We provide trainings in the community and in the school system for both the students and the educators. We have an annual peace walk around gun violence during Violence Prevention Month. And we're also a part of a collaborative to include CASA, the Boys and Girls Club, Making a Change Group, Widener, and so that is funded by PCCD, and we're like kicking it off, but we're all trying to just come together and to provide services and support the community.
So, as a school district, you know, one of the benefits that we can have in general is that we can keep children safe for a good period of the day. So children can come into our buildings and we can re-experience positivity, relationships, building, recovery, and healing. The burden is on us as adults, us as taxpayers, to make sure that we have the resources to train staff, to have the resources in the building, to have enough extracurricular activities and programming to provide all of these services to all kinds of students, so that we can have an inclusive and accepting community within the school. My team in particular, as prevention and intervention liaison, provides services on both ends. So on the front end, on the prevention end, we oversee and collaborate with community partnerships that are doing prevention programs within the school setting. We support the connection and behavioral health services that are in the school. We provide consultation and training to our school counselors and administration around mental health and behavioral health needs. And then on the back end, we are the coordinator for all the crisis response. So we are the first people in the school after a serious incident happens. We're helping the assistant superintendent and principal really manage and wrap their arms around the students and the teachers and the community when there is a significant event that occurs. And then we help to coordinate follow-up. So unfortunately, many of our schools are getting hit and hit and hit. You know, there was a shooting this time, and this is the third child that has died this year, and the teachers they struggle. The adults are struggling, the children are struggling, and so providing some additional support, both for individual adults as well as community partnerships that can come in and do some healing groups and some processing groups to help our staff to heal and recover, to provide these safety for the students.
All right, so as a church, faith without works is dead. So we are praying and we are collaborating with the community-based organizations. When they're having marches, saying no to guns, we participate to raise awareness. As a clinical person with Greater Philadelphia Health Action, we have a community-based establishment that goes into the community to raise awareness, for example, at Ackley House and different areas that we are much visible, recognizing that this is a pandemic. So we provide extensively psychoeducation in addition to the political will to encourage and collaborate with our leaders to institute gun control, if possible, both at state and local levels. Thank you.
As the state's gun violence prevention advocacy organization, we have a lot of different things that we do. I want to tell you about just a few of our past successes. We were instrumental in getting Act 79 passed, which offers greater protections for victims of domestic violence. That was 5 years ago. We work every year to help secure funding for gun violence prevention and intervention programs to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars at a statewide level. And we also are working, we're part of a lawsuit in the city of Philadelphia to have preemption dropped. The Supreme Court earlier this year heard the case and is deliberating, and we don't expect an answer from them from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for several months. But we are very hopeful that something will be done. This particular case puts forth that it is a racial justice issue, and that Philadelphia needs and Pittsburgh need to have the legal teeth to be able to deal with gun violence on their own. We also work at a grassroots level very strongly. We have organizers in the Pittsburgh and Southwest Pennsylvania as well as Southeast Pennsylvania area. We're expanding into Harrisburg, where we have a full-time legislative director who works every day with legislators to get them to sign on to our common agenda gun policies. And those include safe storage requirement for guns when children are present, extreme risk protection orders, which help prevent suicides and mass shootings, universal background checks, which I spoke about before, to remove a loophole in Pennsylvania which allows long guns to be sold by a private seller and purchased by anyone. And then the final one is a requirement, and this is a big one for helping to stop interstate and illegal gun trafficking, the required reporting of lost and stolen guns. What we do is we work at a grassroots level with organizations and with individuals like yourselves to educate through a program that we have and then teach advocacy skills. Our organizers like Grant, the room, Grant, raise your hands, everybody wave to Grant. If you want help writing a letter, if you want help organizing a rally, if you want help having a community town hall, anything like that, Grant is your man. He works in Delaware County, and he will help you to get the job done. Grant got his start. I just want to speak up. Grant's a relatively new hire, but he's been involved in this movement, and I am so thrilled to have him on board because he got involved after the Parkland shooting in Florida, in March for Our Lives, and Grant organized a rally in Westchester that I think maybe 2,000 people attended. So Grant gets things done. Also, we support local groups. We've worked quite a lot with Chester Community Coalition and formed friendships there. And we'll go just about anywhere and do just about anything to get the job done. And we are planning events. We pay for buses and lunches every year in the springtime where we take people to Harrisburg to lobby. So anything at all that we can do to hold legislators accountable and also to support those who are in support of stronger gun violence prevention policies, we will do.
So I'll quickly just share where I work again, just so that folks can check out the website. I serve as the National Organizing Associate at Supermajority. They're a women-led organization. And to say it quickly, just as an example, in 2022, we personally helped to mobilize 4.5 million women to vote. And we were part of a coalition that mobilized 30 million women to vote. And that definitely has some impact, I think, on the gun violence conversation that is happening. But unfortunately, government is pretty gridlocked. So I just want to quickly go over a couple of things I'm working on locally in case anyone wants to get involved.
Please have your mic a little bit closer.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So one project that I'm launching with a group of friends early next year is a deep canvassing project. We're going to start to actually have an inventory of community need, which we're certainly not the first to engage in this work. We just want to add to all the great work that is happening. But we want to do some of that research and help to build narratives along with lots of other great organizations that make community members realize that they have political power and that they should have hope over the decisions that are being made and the money that's being spent. And then the other thing I wanted to lift up is just that we should all really remember that police gun violence is also gun violence. We've unfortunately had a couple of cases here in Delaware County, and so I've spent some personal time trying to not only make sure that those types of events don't keep happening, but that we actually know the true record of what happened and the policies that are enacted on the books in our local communities. And if anybody would like to get involved with that, I'd be happy to talk after.
Okay. I'm trying to put this in two hats because I've been doing some. I've been involved in this gun violence reduction and fighting against this since 1988. And you look at me and say, "Wow!" But 35 years. So currently with PHMC, we hold programs such as Joseph J. Peters Institute, which provide trauma-informed training and counseling and peer-to-peer counseling for children who experience gun violence, also to the parents. So we're in Boys Latin and also some schools around Philadelphia that provides that type of resource to students and those who are affected by gun violence. We're also the fiduciary for the CEG grant, which is the gun violence grant that the city has for about $20 million. So PHMC is the fiduciary of that, gathering local and smaller nonprofits in the Philadelphia area to provide the back-end support, the resources, and all types of information that's necessary to those grassroots nonprofits that's reducing gun violence. Personally, I was working with our Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon as I was her director, providing her information, working with our legislative directors to pass a gun violence law that happened in 2018. Since 1988, when I lost my brother and was shot myself, my family has created the Marcus J. Yates Foundation, who goes to other mothers and families who lost their loved ones, who've been shot, to give them counseling and letting them know how to, get through and maneuver through, find resources, and just help them navigate through such a traumatic time. During that time, we also work with Lost Dreams on Canvas. Lost Dreams on Canvas is a nonprofit. I sit on their board. They also provide those gun violence resources to families that went through it, painting pictures of those who lost their lives to just the tragic gun violence in the city. And we advocate to Harrisburg, to DC, for more gun violence. Also, I speak to young men and boys about gun violence, showing them that they don't have to be a victim of their environment, showing them that there is a way out. You don't necessarily have to either retaliate and go to jail or end up dead, or just sit and wallow in the environment that you're in. So I've been doing that since I was since like the 6th grade, going to Harrisburg, going to DC, and talking to high schoolers and now young men as an adult. And then finally, worked the Delaware County Black Caucus. As Colleen said, gun violence is, even when it comes from our police officers, we are a nonprofit advocacy group who ensures that the protection of Black and brown folks in Delaware County is there. And we fought for numerous occasions, and the latest one was the Fancybility story, to make sure that we get proper representation and people are held accountable when it comes to gun violence.
So I would just like to say I want to piggyback off of many comments that were said, but I think that's great. Grant, I started out being an activist with the March for Our Lives when I was a freshman in high school. That's kind of what drove me into what I do now. I was in Ridley High School, and because I experienced a bomb threat when I was in elementary school, so the March for Our Lives was really, really meaningful to me, and I walked out, and I was one of the only people who walked out of Ridley High School marching for those students. And I walked all the way to Set Representative Leanne Kruger's office and was like, how can I help address this gun violence issue? And that led me to being her intern for majority of my high school career and a lot of the advocacy that I do now. Which, speaking on that, UDTJ, Understanding Devotion, Take Action, Justice, how we get our name is because
we strive for programming and for justice for all communities, no matter what your background is, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's minorities, whether it's anyone. We just want you to have the programming and the voice that you need to be heard. We have worked in the county as the same case as a vulnerability case because we know as activists that unfortunately some of the most traumatic crimes against gun violence happen at the hands of the people who are supposed to protect us. So we have worked on that case. I'm sure you've seen UDTJ standing outside of some street corner in Upper Darby, like with a big poster in our hands and our big microphone, just, you know, screaming that we want justice for these families. But we also believe, as a youth advocate, as someone who is 21, I just want to echo on when I walk into a school board meeting. You know, I'm from Ridley, but when I walk into a school board meeting and I see the lack of resources for these students, and I know because of school funding and because of how unconstitutional it is in Pennsylvania, that because of where I'm from in Ridley, that I'm gonna have more resources for my mental health, more resources for programming, more resources for what I do after school. And I know when I go around the corner to Lansdowne and Chester, where there's trans people getting killed just because of who they are, and I know that those students and those community members have no resources, I know where the issues lies, and it's with school funding, it's with our programming. So I highly encourage everybody to talk to your members, your community leaders, but it doesn't just have to be with legislators. Your power is in you. UDTJ started with 3 people who just cared, a high schooler who was just holding a sign for March for Our Lives, you know, community leaders that were just like, we gotta wake up and do something. So I think it's powerful to go to Harrisburg. I think it's powerful to write a letter, but I also think it's powerful to find the power within yourself and research yourself, and then come up and talk to your legislators or just talk to fellow community members or nonprofits and figure out, hey, you know, I got this background, I really care about the youth. What programming can I start to help my community right now? And that's what I think I see with all of these panel members, is that they found the power within themselves to educate themselves on the data and said, what can I do to help my community? And that's why we're sitting here, and I hope more people can sit here to find what can you do to help us right now. Thank you.
So it's in the name, heeding God's call to end gun violence. We believe that people of faith have a responsibility to be involved, not just in increasing gun violence, but in ending it. So we work to mobilize communities of faith, churches, mosques, synagogues. There are people of faith sitting at this table. There have always been people of faith involved in this fight. Our goal is to get more whole communities involved. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the Memorial to the Lost t-shirt display. We are always looking for more churches who are willing to host that. We have a legislative day in Harrisburg that's coming up in November. The Gun Violence Awareness Day in Drexel Hill was mentioned that we had last Sunday. We have those throughout the year, different communities, partnering with different churches, letter writing campaigns. So there's a lot going on, but our goal really is to get people of faith and their faith communities involved more than they are now.
Wow, thank you all so much. You know, I think what I took from all of the panelists and what you had to add is the fact that this is a multi-layered, multi-pronged process, and if we want to end gun violence. It starts with you, but it's also community related, and it's one thing to march, but it's another thing to make sure that you're enacting policy changes. It's important to be able to plug into your lawmakers, because we can march all day, but if there's nothing structurally on the books to make a change, then it doesn't necessarily impact, or at least it's not a sustainable impact. So I really love that you all touched on different aspects of what you do, what your organization do to address the issue of gun violence. Thank you. All right, I won't get on my soapbox about this next question because it's my personal fight. But contrary to common belief, most people with mental illnesses are not violent and are actually more likely to be victimized than they are to victimize others. Contrary to popular belief, my soapbox. How do you think you, in your respective roles, can address the mental health impact of gun violence on those who have been victimized or traumatized by such violence?
I have a couple of thoughts on this. So first off, I want to make sure that everyone knows that the vast majority of gun violence is actually gun suicide. So just as our host has talked about, people who are in a mental health struggle are much more likely to hurt themselves than they are others. I want to break down what isn't mental illness, because I think that gets thrown out there pretty often and it's not very accurate. Mental illness is not socioeconomic stress. It's not learned bigotry. It's not poor impulse control. It's not reactions to violent public policies, and it's not reactions to disinformation. And I think the reason why other than ableism, the reason why this gets thrown out there so often is because if you think of someone's actions as an individual action and not part of a system that is happening, a system of oppression, a system of political choices and policy choices, then you can make an entire community think that there's nothing that can actually be done about it. We experience it every single day. There's another mass shooting. There's another, attack on a community, another attack at a movie theater. And if you label it as mental illness, then it's an unknown thing. We don't know who's going to do it next, and we don't know why they're doing it, and we don't know where they're going to do it. When ultimately, there are gun policies that we need to pass. We need to have access to mental health care. We don't even do that, and so people often are like, oh, it's a mental health problem, it's not a gun problem. They don't even do that. So, be serious about that. And the last thing I just would say is that we're not going to be able to counsel our way out of a traumatic world. So we can have all of the mental health care we need, we can fix all of our gun violence policies, but we're not going to really start to think about how we make a world that is inclusive of everyone, that allows everyone a chance to succeed and have the resources that they need. We're still going to have different types of violence, it's just going to show up in a new way.
A couple of the policies that we're working on to reduce access to guns, I believe, are designed to help people who are going through a crisis. And Colleen is perfectly right in a lot of times gun violence, especially mass shootings, gets blamed on people with mental illness problems, and I've heard it said so many times, well, you can't be right in the head if you're going into a supermarket and shooting 10 people. That's not mental illness, that's a hate problem. A hate problem and an access to weapons problem, right? So the Extreme Risk Protection Order bill, which we helped pass through the State House and is awaiting, hopefully, a hearing in our State Senate soon. It was HB 1018, House Bill 1018. And it's designed to protect family members and everyone else and the potential shooter when there is a gun available. What does it look like? Let's say that I am a legal gun owner and I've got a gun and I'm extraordinarily, I'm talking about using the gun to hurt myself or to hurt other people. My son, my domestic partner, or someone living with me can go to a judge and ask for an extreme risk protection order to be given if they are able to present proof. There is a burden of proof, and there's due process. And the judge issues an order. It's kind of like a PFA, but different. It happens more quickly. I then relinquish my firearms to the police, and then I can go back. There's a hearing in 2 weeks, which I have an option to show up at. And then after a year, giving me a chance to get the help I need so that I don't take my life or somebody else's with the gun is automatically relinquished unless a successive extreme risk protection order is also put in place. So there's due process. It protects me. It protects other people. It also applies to, let's say, law enforcement sees somebody, like the Uvalde shooter, posting a lot of hate speech, posting pictures of himself with guns online. They can use an extreme risk protection order to go in and remove that gun. Because right now in Pennsylvania, there's no legal means to remove a gun. Okay, so these are people going through a mental health crisis, if it's a suicide, right? It's a crisis, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this person has mental health, is the sort of person that needs to go into needs to be committed to a mental health facility, right? There are protective measures that don't criminally penalize people. It's a civil procedure. So that's one of the policies. The other one is our safe storage policy, which would reduce suicides. And we all know that suicides happen, well maybe we don't all know, but suicides generally happen in a moment of crisis. A crisis passes, and then people are less likely to take their guns. When there's, or to take their life. When there's access to a gun, easy access to a gun, what in other circumstances, with pills, with any other method, you're likely to survive the suicide attempt. With a gun, you're not. You're not. So those are some policies that we're working on.
And yes, you're absolutely correct.
That's right. 1 second. So just for the sake of time, I'd ask that we be concise and succinct and so forth and so on, so that we can allow the audience to ask some questions, okay? Thank you.
Right, so yes, so you're absolutely right. There is a false misunderstanding from a public's perspective that every crime that happens, somebody has a mental health issue. And that is why at our job, we in our community-based practice, there are folks who've advocated, we have to bring like a gun thing to manage people who are coming in. You know, my staff, my front desk staff has asked us putting barriers, and I've constantly educated them that, listen, the people who are coming in here are people like us, and we can see them as criminals or potential violent people. You know, and since then we've been able to work with those individuals. But I think it's also important that we help break the stigma, you know, as being perpetrated by the media. When somebody happens, the media carries it out, he's mentally off. And so there is this media disinformation about people who engage in violence. And quite frankly, it could be just a matter of hate crime, not necessarily somebody who is mentally off. Thank you.
All right, real quick. So we can continue to provide trauma-informed therapeutic services at no cost, and also free of the hassle of trying to see if we accept their insurance or not. We can educate the public and policymakers, and also continue to partner with organizations like Aspire for advocacy.
I'll just say access to, you know, children with unique needs, undocumented children, children who are in the DHS system, children who live in a group home, children who do not speak English. All of these children need support, need prevention support, need, you know, clinical support, need resources and help. And we don't have enough resources to, you know, serve the English-speaking population.
However, these children have these unique needs, and then they're just getting missed, and then things are escalating. And so, from a school district perspective, we see it in the discipline. Oh, this child needs to be, expelled. Well, she lives in a group home, and she went through this and that and that. Does she have mental illness? I'm not sure. What would you be like if you lost your parents and have nobody to care for you and have been in 5 foster homes? I don't know. Is that a mental illness? It is not. It is a tough life, and this is a normal reaction to a difficult life. And so, how do we wrap our arms around those types of children? How do we get their signatures for consent and get them to get to the service and receive that service?
I don't see it as a mental health issue. It's a poverty problem. The people that I know, the people that been affected, it's because it's a lack of access to resources. You put us in a community that's starved out. Then you have lack of resources. Then we don't have a job. And then you usher us through schools that's, again, underserved. And then you say it's a mental health issue. No, it's poverty. And if we can provide more access to resources and not just frame it as mental health, because honestly, yeah, everyone's mental health is going to take a toll if I got to come outside and see the conditions my neighborhood is in. That's going to toll on anybody's mental health. So I don't want to disassociate or negate mental health as being an issue, but that's not the reason why people in my neighborhood is dying or they losing life or going to jail. It's because they don't have the resources. It's because they don't have the overall access to make their lives better.
I think it can be both. I think when we look, I know from my community what gun violence may look like. But for another community, it could be different. And I think it's not just one issue of mental health. I don't think it's just one issue of poverty. I think it can be all. I think it can be different for each individual on why they do this. I think it's different when we talk about different school shooters versus community members with lack of resources. So I just want to say it can be both. It can be all.
So getting back to the original question, our organization isn't a mental health organization. That being said, we're made up of churches, and churches have always been a safe place for communities to grieve, to support one another, to come alongside one another, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Thank you all so much. I mean, the conversation is so enriching. I don't want it to end. I'm just like, tell me more, tell me more. We'll talk after this, everyone. But now I would like to just kind of turn it over to the audience for questions that you may have for our esteemed panelists. Sure.
Hi. I just wanted to echo what Malcolm said earlier, or just recently, Malcolm said that he didn't think it was a mental health issue, and it really struck with me because I was just what Malcolm just said, and said that he didn't think it was a mental health issue but versus a poverty issue. It really struck with me because it felt like I did a pilot project or program for what he just said, because I was labeled a menace to society at one point. I was given juvenile life as a juvenile because I was a rep of, got into some stuff. Did 5 years in prison and stuff of where I came from. Then when I left my community, for some reason, I ended up with more access. And then because of where I was incarcerated, I got a GED, but I didn't know about it when I came here. But when I went out there, they said, hey, why don't you go to college, or why don't you try community college, and things like that. It was just the access with the people around me. Then I went to college, ended up interning with council office just because I want, you know, just the folks around me and helping the community and things like that, and then ended up in Congress. And now I'm with Congresswoman Mary Grace Scanlon's office, and I've been doing this work for almost 12 years now. And that's what you just said, it really did strike with me. It's not really, because I was labeled someone with mental health issues when I was here. And then when I left, I didn't have mental issues. I was actually out here learning and also providing service. So, thanks for that.
I really love that. We didn't get to the point of talking about the impact of poverty, but I'm so glad you said that, because with tons and tons and tons of studies have shown what it looks like when there's access available in not just communities, but in countries at large, versus what it looks like when there isn't access, right? And how it impacts a person's overall well-being, their mental health, their physical health, so forth and so on. And as I said, it's such a rich conversation, we could go on, but I'm so glad that he made that point and that it resonated with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that, because you can't be what you can't see, right? And it wasn't until, for me, I got the opportunity to go to DC, and I give this credit to all the time. Went to DC, someone came outside, he was a congressman. He was in a suit, he was put together, watch, bracelets, and I just didn't know who he was, but I wanted to be him at 12 years old. And finally, I saw something, and here I am. So, and that's why I do what I do for young kids, because it's not about mental health. It's, damn, I don't see anything but what I'm surrounded with. So.
I'm not putting that mental health is not an issue, it's part of it. But where I'm from West Philly. Majority of my folks, I mean, mental health is not really the problem, it's what we see. Drug dealers, what we do because of what we see and what's available to us. Like I always say that, drug dealers are the best outreach people. They always there.
That's a great point.
Hi. I just wanted to address Mr. Yates. So I definitely agree when you talk about poverty, because I think what I see, I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in Abington, Willow Grove area, where those resources are there. However, with that being said, I've been on this, in the city of Philadelphia as well. I remember as a child being in Abington School District, a very rich school district, and then one year, I don't know what my parents were thinking, we moved and I went to Omni High. The science books that we used in 7th and 8th grade, we were using these books in 11th grade, and it blew my mind, because I was like, I literally didn't do homework for that whole year I was at Omni and passed, and something is definitely wrong with that. And then my second question is, how do you impact these families when you have generational trauma, generational poverty, you have like all these issues, even generational mindsets? How do you get to each of these individual families to break the cycle of the victimization? I lost my son last year, not the gun violence, he was hit by a car, and I know just because the resources that I know to get to, I was, I'm not all right, but I know I'm not all right, but I know God holds me. But I'm saying that to say, I know where to get the resources. I know how to stick, to grab hold of my faith. But there are all these individual households, people just don't know. And so how do you get to these people where the mindset of the victim has got a grip on them? And so all these kids that you see in the streets that's running around, what you see, you don't see unruly kids. You see hundreds of cases of trauma, breaking into buildings, shooting people, robbing people. That's what this is. And unfortunately, it starts at home. You can, like I said, march to the moon fall out the sky. But if it doesn't start in the home, the Bible says you raise a child in the way they should go, and they won't depart from that. And I believe that. I truly, God honestly believe that. Sorry.
Hi, I want to
commend you guys, everyone who's sitting up here for the work that you do in the community. I am a mother of five. I have 3 girls and 2 boys. One of my sons passed away, not to violence, not in his sleep, thankfully. My son, I was raised in a 2-parent household, and so was my kids. My daughters grew up to become professionals into nursing, HR, but it was my son that kept getting into trouble, like he spoke about. So when in school, he kept getting into trouble, kept getting into fights. So what they did was they took him out of the school and put him in the CEP program, where they put him around a lot of other kids with behavioral problems. So going back to how do you differentiate from someone having a mental problem to a behavioral problem? Because with the way we raise our sons and our children, this is my daughter, and the way we raise our children is to, again, to be respectful. It's called the rule of life. Have integrity, respectful, be compassionate. But what we didn't know is when they did an assessment for our family assessment, they found out that we have some mental health issues that goes beyond the grandparents and their parents. And Ramla had 15 kids, and some of them did have some mental issues. So my son was put around people with behavior issues, but his mental was never challenged. So because his mental wasn't never challenged, he began being around other people with behavior problems and started picking up those issues. And now he became a product of his environment. So it was the school. And I kept telling the school, I don't think that he has, because he doesn't act like this at home. And this is, he's scared of his father. It's when you guys put him out of the regular public school system and put him in the behavior school system, that's when he started now getting arrested, now going to jail. And then comes to find out my son was diagnosed with bipolar all this time. So the school system, you guys have to get involved in trying to differentiate from a person with mental issues and behavior issues, because it's 2 separate entities. And when you bring somebody with a mental issue into a behavior environment, they become that person. They become the people they surround. My son now want to be out in the streets, he want to hang out. It's like he had the love of the streets and the love of his family.